Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Lisa the PFG here. Hope you're having a lovely day today. It's Sunday morning. I hope it's a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are, wherever in the world. I hope it's a good one for you. And apologies for the long gap from the last one because it's been a bit of a crazy week and a bit. So the time to engage with you guys has been very small. On my part, obviously, nothing to do with you guys, nothing to do with anyone else bar myself. Life has just been getting in the way recently, so enough excuses. I'm back. I'm going to make some videos, probably, hopefully, a lot more frequently than I have been in the last couple of weeks. So, let's get to it. I just wanted to cover some stuff. I did think about what to do, whether to cover one of the biggest ones that's been on just about everyone's radar recently of Elon Musk's, not just his purchase of Twitter, which has obviously been signed and sealed at this point, but everything that's occurred since. And it's all been pretty hilarious, if you ask me. Everything from the mass culling of the staff right up to the uncensoring of certain personalities and their accounts being reinstated. It's all been very entertaining from my side. So that is something I might and could well do a video on at some point in the near future. But for now, I wanted to concentrate on something that came to my attention a few days ago, and it was the story in response to Quentin Tarantino. And his appearance on a podcast where he expressed his disappointment, if you want, or lamented the state of current Hollywood, and called it, I think in his exact words, probably the worst era that filmmaking has gone through in quite a long time. I think the one he compared it to, in his own view, was the 80s. I think in his view, the 80s was also not a very good era for movies either, but yeah, not to focus too much on that, because I mean, feel how you might about the 80s and the Hollywood at that point. I think a lot of people would argue that it was certainly better than what's going on right now, but certainly his comments about current day, and it seemed to center mostly around the absolute deluge of superhero content that we've had to put up with in the past few years. And I'll be honest with you from the off, it's most of what he said I absolutely, in fact I think nearly all of what he said I agreed with, because and the focus, because of his appearance on this, it also harked back for a lot of people to comments that Martin Scorsese made a few years ago regarding a similar feeling he has about the state of Hollywood as well, and the mass production of superhero movies that we've had. I believe in his words it was the fact that they feel like, you know, factory processed, and they're very much of a template where there's no real stakes, there's no danger, you know, you're always pretty much safe in the knowledge that the hero's going to prevail and that there won't be any consequences for them, well, negative consequences anyway. And I mean, at the time when he said that, I believe it was about maybe 2 or 3 years ago when he said this comment, it might even have been longer. I'll admit, think it sounded a little bit like a director who knew that he was in the twilight years of his career and was maybe just, I don't want to say bitter, but at least, you know, knew that he was coming to an end, and that he's seen this current form of entertainment that was gripping everyone, and wasn't entirely keen on it, and didn't really see its value. But I mean, at this point, I think he's been validated in his opinion. So I'll get into it from this point. I've got a couple of articles that I brought up, and the the biggest one, which I don't want to focus too much on this guy, because my God, he seems like the most thin-skinned, bloody figure in entertainment right now. But it came to a head because of his response to it. It was, as you can probably see in front of you now, Simu Liu the star of the Shang-Chi movie that came out last year, which, full disclosure, I have not yet seen and probably don't have that much intention of watching either. And not because I'm racist, but because, because I've simply had enough of Marvel for the time being. I really don't have any time or will in my schedule at the minute to fill my entertainment downtime with anything Marvel related, unless it's going back and watching some of the older output. Um, but his response to what Tarantino's comments was, even though it had, albeit a very backhanded sort of, you know, hail to the, like, bow to the guy about what a legend he is, he still very much came across as being pretty salty about what he'd said. And he so he appeared on this podcast, as it says in the article in front of us, on the Two Bears One Cave podcast, which I believe is hosted by Tom Segura, who's a famous American comedian. I think he's been on Joe Rogan's podcast a few times. He said that you have all these actors who have become famous playing these characters, Tarantino said, but they're not movie stars, right? Captain America is the star, or Thor is the star. I mean, I'm not the first person to say that. I think that's been said a zillion times, but it's like, you know, it's these franchise characters that become a star. Tarantino said while he does not hate Marvel movies, he dislikes their current ubiquity. Look, I used to collect Marvel comics like crazy when I was a kid. He said there's an aspect that if these movies were coming out when I was in my 20s, I would totally be effing happy and totally love them. I mean, they wouldn't be the only movies being made. They would be those movies amongst other movies. But, you know, I'm almost 60, so yeah, no, I'm not quite as excited about them. So, that enough is a capsule of what the guy's feeling about this, right? And I think at this point he reflects just about what a lot of moviegoers are feeling as well. And I mean, those, you need look no further than the box office figures of this year, where the 3 Marvel movies that we got, I mean, if you're not counting Spider-Man No Way Home, which technically could say 2022 as well because it came out at the end of 2021, so it was still riding a wave of success going into the new year. But the ones that were out and out 2022 movies have not kicked the ass at the box office that like Marvel were expecting and like damn well wanted them to, not but also expected, as I said. You had Doctor Strange, which just about made the billion mark, but not quite. You had Thor, which didn't get anywhere near it. And you've got the current one, which is Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which, I mean, I haven't looked at any recent figures, but I think as far as most people are concerned, that pretty much underperformed. I think it still did well, but it didn't get anywhere near the numbers that they were expecting. And obviously time will tell for a bit longer while it's still running in the cinemas of how it will do in the end. But it's just, when you've got that and you couple it with the biggest movie of the year, which was Top Gun, and will be until the end of the year. I don't think we can dispute that it will be at this point, because I really don't see Black Panther, even if it does do well, I don't see it reaching the levels that Top Gun Maverick has. When you've got that being the most successful movie of the year, in a year when you've had 3 Marvel movies, which you would have expected, and make no mistake, the studio expected those to make $1 billion each, at least. I don't think there's any disputing that. That tells you that people are tired of this stuff. There's just far too much of it. And when you even throw into the mix that there's a bunch of Disney Plus series that you have to consume, and some of them do tie into the movies and their stories, and people just are tuning out. They've had enough. They're absolutely saturated with this stuff. But to go further on to it, I just want to read them because they're funny, but I don't want to focus too much on him because, like I said, giving this guy the time of day isn't really my intention, because, I mean, at the end of the day, he's an actor, so therefore his whole job is to get people's attention, but he's an out-and-out attention seeker who just cannot take any kind of criticism by the looks of things, even if it's constructive. Because, I mean, if you read there what I've just read out of that one paragraph of what Tarantino said in this podcast, there was nothing offensive in there. It wasn't like he was going, oh, you're all fucking shit, your movies suck, they're rubbish, he wasn't saying any of that. He was being quite eloquent about it. and saying that this is the problem with your product, this is why I don't like it, and as in I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but for him being who he is and his status at this point within Hollywood of being this legendary director who's made all these movies that a bunch of people love, he's earned his right to not just have his opinion, but for it to be taken seriously, because he's a seasoned, I think it's fair to say, expert in how to make movies at this point. I don't think many could dispute that. Same goes for Martin Scorsese as well. But I mean, his reaction was that he just said on, I can find it here, he says that if the only gatekeepers to movie stardom came from Tarantino and Scorsese, I would never have had the opportunity to lead a $400 million plus movie. I am in awe of their filmmaking genius. They are transcendent auteurs, but they don't get to point their nose at me or anyone. Yes, they do, because like, for the reasons I just said. He says, no movie studio is or ever will be perfect. I am proud to work with one that has made sustained efforts to improve diversity on screen by creating heroes that empower and inspire people of all communities everywhere. I love the Golden Age too, but it was white as hell, and there it is. Like the truth always comes out in the end. You know, they mask right off. This guy doesn't have a problem with Tarantino in their opinion. What bothers him more, I think, is that he knows that there is a kernel of truth to it, and that also a lot of other people feel the same way. And that's reflected in the numbers of the movies I just said, the ones that came out this year, but also the ones that came out last year, and including his own movie, because I mean, he was in this 400 plus. Why he has to flex with that number, I've got no idea, because I mean, it seems like he sees more validation in the cost of the movie than he does the actual quality of the product that got put out. Because all I've heard from anyone is that Shang-Chi was really below average. So I mean, again, he's well within his rights to retort to this stuff and to respond to any of these criticisms that he receives, but he just seems to do it quite a lot, and when he does, he sounds like a little bit of a bitch. So, I mean, just to be crude there at the end. But where I wanted to take this to wrap it up was what I've just brought up on the screen now, which is an article it's an opinion piece from NBC, and a chap called Noah Berlatsky, who I've not had a chance to look too much into, but in this article he also comes across as a little bit of the salty side, and doesn't really hold back, and can we just point out the fact that they spelt Tarantino wrong as well, so right off the bat, how am I supposed to take this outlet seriously? The title of the article, for crying out loud, I mean, it's alright to have a few spelling errors within the actual article, but my god, a little grammar Nazi there coming out of me, sorry. So what this guy writes is just a little bit more of a spurg in the same vein as Mr. Liu, but it goes down this similar ridiculous path, like following on from the white as hell comment at the end of Liu's reaction. And the quote that got me, because I don't want to give this any more airtime than I need to, the quote that stood out to me the most was one around about the middle, towards the sort of first 4 or 5 paragraphs of the article, where he says that he calls himself a Marvel skeptic, this chap, but he said that even claiming that this era of film is the worst in history and using the language of invasion makes these directors sound like aging cranks yelling at the kids to get off their grass. And like I've just said to you, I had a little bit of that vibe back when Martin Scorsese made his initial comments about it. But because of how everything's gone down since then, he's become more and more vindicated in his outtake and in his outlook. But this comment right afterwards, he says, it also makes them sound, unfortunately, like they're yelling at women to get off their screens. And it's like, where do you make that leap? It's like, how do you go from him saying that he thinks this is the worst era of cinema since the 80s to he doesn't want women on screen? It's patently ridiculous. So let's just do a rundown of Quentin Tarantino's works, which, by the way, have come between the 2 eras that he's pointed out as being the worst. So, I mean, whether you want to call him being arrogant or not, he obviously counts himself as being amongst one of the better eras of cinema. And I would actually agree with that, because there are only, I think, 2 movies of Tarantino's I haven't seen, and they, not for the fact of not wanting to see them, it's simply because for one reason or another they passed me by. But I mean, you could just, so from the 90s right through to the late 2000s, when his most recent one came, early like mid 2010s or late 2010s of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. There is a list of female characters, all of whom had consequence within the movies that they were in. So he's right back to Uma Thurman, Mia Wallace in Pulp Fiction. For crying out loud, she's the main picture on the fucking movie's poster. You've got Jackie Brown, again, title character. Kill Bill 1 and 2, title character. Within Kill Bill, you had Lucy Liu's character, Oren Ishii, who was like the head of the Yakuza, for God's sake. However you feel about her position in that and how convincing she was in that role, I've heard a lot of people who weren't, but I mean, it remains that he saw her as a valid and strong enough personality and character to have that kind of role within the movie. And you go further on to, you've said Kill Bill, said Django Unchained. There was Django's wife, Broomhilda, who's the motivation for his actions within that movie. He's rescuing her from her captor, Calvin Candy. You've got Hateful Eight, which is one of the ones I haven't seen, but that's about a group of assassins. One of those is played by women, Jennifer Jason Leigh. I mean, the list is just endless. I mean, Inglourious Basterds as well. That is the main female character in that is probably the most consequential, in that she activates a revenge plan to avenge the deaths of her Jewish family, to take down the very people that she can't stand, and pulls off a pretty elaborate plan to do so, and managing to get all these people in one place in order to take them out. And within that as well, you have the actress, Shoshana's the name of the Jewish character, but the German actress played by Diane Kruger, Bridget. She's a spy working on behalf of the Allies. She puts herself, like, putting herself at great personal risk because she's German in order to do so. And it's like they make it their point, these people, to try and make you forget what these people have actually achieved with their accusations. And then in the aftermath of this is just a blurb of statistics of how many female directors we've had, and how many, how the presence of women within the indie scene and stuff. It's like, okay, fine. And then you've got the Chloe Zhao directing Eternals, which again is another Marvel movie which not a lot of people saw or liked. So I mean, it's another example of an opinion like this, where all it takes is a little bit of prodding, a little bit just to pull one of those little blocks out, and you've got a Jenga tower falling down in the form of their opinion being completely ruined. Because it's like, you can't deny that people like Tarantino especially he's made it his goal to have as many sort of necessary and interesting and, for the most part, some pretty strong female characters within his movies. If you want to go down the route that this guy seems to be, even though he says that they want women to get off their screens, the remainder of his opinion piece seems to go along the lines of the presence of women behind the camera. So it's like, okay, so there's arguments to be made that there hasn't been a great deal of representation of women in directorial positions, but that's changed. And he says it himself in as many words, and it's like, well, so what seems to be his problem? And he can't make the opinion for the reasons I just said about the lack of women, especially if he's doing it in a counter-argument to Tarantino, because he himself would be able to just say, well, look at this list of female characters I've got in my movies, spanning the past 3 decades. Do they not count? Surely not. Again, it's just more cope, more doubling down, more not being able to form an opinion that makes any sense. The only reason that they have to express these things is to maintain the narrative in their heads that Hollywood is racist, Hollywood is sexist, that it has been for a long time, and we need to make these changes to improve what's already coming. Even though the figures speak for themselves, that the steps that have been taken by the current brood of creators they're not really making that many strides, and not a lot of people are going to see these things, and when they are going to see them, they don't think that much of them. I'll leave that there. I think that's a good point to end it on. So thanks everyone for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up. If you enjoyed it also, please think of sharing the video with everyone. I would appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see some more of my videos, and leave a comment if you have something to add to the conversation. And on that note, I will leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. Take care everyone. Bye bye.